August 17, 1976, 10:30 a.m. Los Angeles Superior Court foreclosure auction room. 32 people packed into uncomfortable folding chairs. At the front, a cheap wooden gavel sits on a table next to a stack of property deeds. In the back row, an elderly black couple sits holding hands. Robert Washington is 73 years old, wearing a suit that's 20 years out of style. His wife Dorothy is 71, clutching a handkerchief she's already soaked through with tears. They're about to lose the house they've lived in for 32 years, the house where they raised 3 children, the house where they celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every anniversary, all because of an $18,000 tax bill they don't actually owe. The auctioneer stands up and clears his throat. First property, 4247 Arlington Avenue, opening bid $18,000. A man in the third row raises his hand. $19,000. Then, another voice from the back, deep and calm. $50,000, cash. Everyone turns. A man in sunglasses and a baseball cap stands up. Nobody recognizes him. The auctioneer stammers, "Sir, did you say 50,000? I did." 3 minutes later, Marlon Brando owns the house, and what he does next, handing the deed to 2 strangers and walking away, is just the beginning. Because inside that house, hidden in a wall, Brando left something that wouldn't be found for 15 years, something that would explain everything. To understand why Marlon Brando walked into that courtroom, you need to go back 3 weeks. To August 1st, 1976. To a newspaper article that most people flipped past without a second thought. The Los Angeles Times ran a small story on page 14. The headline read, "Elderly couple faces foreclosure over tax error." The article was maybe 200 words. It explained that Robert and Dorothy Washington, longtime residents of South Central Los Angeles, were losing their home because the city had made a clerical error on their property taxes. The Washingtons had paid their taxes on time every year for 3 decades. But in 1973, a city clerk had accidentally applied someone else's tax lien to their property. $18,000 in unpaid taxes that weren't theirs. The Washingtons had spent 3 years trying to fix it. They'd gone to City Hall. They'd hired a lawyer they couldn't afford. They'd appealed to the county supervisor. Nobody would help them. The bureaucracy was too big, too slow, too indifferent. And now, on August 17th, their house was going to auction. Most people who read that article probably felt a twinge of sympathy and then moved on. But Marlon Brando read it and felt something else. Rage. Brando was in his Mulholland Drive home that morning, drinking coffee and reading the paper. When he got to the article about the Washingtons, he stopped, read it twice. Then he called his lawyer. "Mort, I need you to find out about a foreclosure auction." His lawyer, Mort Heller, sighed. "Marlon, what are you planning?" "Just get me the details. Date, time, location." "Why?" "Because somebody needs to fix this." Mort had worked with Brando long enough to know when to stop asking questions. He made some calls, found out the auction was scheduled for August 17th at the Los Angeles Superior Court. He called Brando back with the information. "What are you going to do?" Mort asked. "I'm going to buy a house." "You already have 3 houses." "Not for me, for them." Mort paused. "Marlon, you can't just watch me." Brando hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, Brando did something he rarely did. He made a plan. He called Mort back and told him to prepare $50,000 in cash. He bought a baseball cap and sunglasses so he wouldn't be recognized. He practiced sitting quietly in the back of rooms, being invisible. Because Brando understood something important. If people knew he was there, it would become a circus. Reporters, cameras, the whole thing would turn into a publicity stunt. And Brando hated publicity stunts. What he was planning wasn't charity, it was justice. And justice doesn't need an audience. August 17th arrived. Brando woke up early, put on jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and a denim jacket. He looked like a construction worker, not a movie star. He grabbed the baseball cap, the sunglasses, and a cashier's check for $50,000. He drove himself to the courthouse in his old pickup truck. He arrived at 10:15 a.m., 15 minutes before the auction started. The room was already filling up, real estate speculators mostly, men in cheap suits with calculators looking to flip foreclosed properties for profit. Brando walked to the back row and sat down. Nobody looked at him twice. Then the Washingtons walked in. Robert was tall, maybe 6 feet 2, but age had bent him forward. He walked slowly, carefully, like every step hurt. Dorothy was small, frail, holding his arm for support. They were both dressed in their Sunday best, even though this was a Tuesday, because losing your home was an occasion, even if it was the worst occasion of your life. They sat in the back row, 3 seats away from Brando. Dorothy was crying softly. Robert stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, trying to hold it together. Brando looked at them and saw his own parents. His father, Marlon Sr., who'd worked himself to death for nothing. His mother, Dorothy, who'd suffered in silence for years. He saw every working-class family he'd ever known, people who did everything right and still got crushed by a system that didn't care. At 10:30 a.m., the auctioneer stood up. He was a thin man in his 50s with a bored expression. He'd done 100 of these auctions. To him, it was just paperwork. "Good morning, everyone. We have 6 properties on the docket today. First up, 4247 Arlington Avenue, South Central Los Angeles. 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,200 square feet. Foreclosed due to unpaid property taxes totaling $18,000. Opening bid is $18,000. Do I have 18? A man in the third row raised his hand. 19,000. The auctioneer nodded. 19,000. Do I have 20? Another man. 20,000. 20? Do I have 21? 22, said the first man. Dorothy was crying harder now. Robert put his arm around her shoulders. "It's okay, Dot, it's okay." But it wasn't okay. They both knew it. The bidding continued. 23, 24, 25. It was moving fast. The speculators knew the house was worth at least $60,000 in good condition. Even in rough shape, it was worth $50,000. So they kept bidding. 28,000, said a man in the front row. 28. Do I have 29? Silence. Going once at 28,000, going twice. 50,000. The voice came from the back, deep, calm, certain. Everyone turned. Brando stood up. He kept the sunglasses on, the cap pulled low, but his voice was unmistakable. The auctioneer blinked. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you say 50,000? "I did. That's well above the opening bid. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. $50,000. Cash." The room was dead silent. The speculators looked at each other, confused. Who was this guy? Why would he overpay by $20,000? The auctioneer cleared his throat. Okay. I have 50,000 from the gentleman in the back. Do I have 51? Nobody moved. Going once at 50,000, going twice, sold to the gentleman in the back for $50,000. The gavel came down. Brando walked to the front of the room. The auctioneer handed him the paperwork. "I'll need your name, sir, and proof of funds." Brando pulled out the cashier's check and handed it over. "Marlon Brando." The auctioneer's eyes went wide. You're Marlon Brando?" "I am." Whispers erupted around the room. People stood up, craning their necks to see. Brando ignored them. He signed the paperwork, took the deed, and turned around. Robert and Dorothy were still sitting in the back row, frozen. They had no idea what was happening. They'd just watched their house get sold to a stranger for $50,000. They didn't know whether to cry or scream or leave. Brando walked straight toward them. "Mr. and Mrs. Washington?" Robert stood up slowly. "Yes, sir. I just bought your house." Dorothy's face crumpled. "We know. We're so sorry, Mr. Brando. We'll be out by the end of the week. We just need a few days to—" "No," Brando interrupted gently. "You don't understand." He held out the deed. "This is yours. I bought it for you." Robert stared at the paper in Brando's hand. "I don't—" "What?" "Your house. It's yours. Free and clear. No mortgage, no debt. I'm giving it back to you." Dorothy gasped. Robert's knees buckled. Brando reached out to steady him. "Why?" Robert whispered. "Why would you do this?" Brando looked him in the eyes. "Because what they did to you is wrong. You paid your taxes. They made a mistake. And instead of fixing it, they took your home. That's not justice. So I'm fixing it." Dorothy was sobbing now, full-body sobs. "We can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not too much. It's exactly enough." Brando pressed the deed into Robert's hand. "This is yours. It always was. I'm just making sure it stays that way." Robert looked down at the deed, then back at Brando. "How can we ever repay you? You can't, and you don't need to. Just live in your home. Take care of each other. That's all I want." Brando turned to leave. Robert called after him. "Mr. Brando, wait. At least let us thank you properly. Come to the house. Let us make you dinner. Something." Brando paused. "Maybe someday, but not today. Today you two just go home. You're home." He walked out of the courtroom before anyone could take a picture or ask a question. He got in his truck and drove away. The whole thing had taken less than an hour. Robert and Dorothy stood in the empty courtroom, holding the deed, not quite believing it was real. The auctioneer walked over. "Congratulations, folks. That's your house now. Legally yours." Robert looked at him. "Do you know why he did that?" The auctioneer shook his head. "No idea, but I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Robert and Dorothy drove home in silence. When they pulled into the driveway of 4247 Arlington Avenue, Dorothy started crying again. But this time, they were different tears. "We're home, Robbie. We're really home. We are, Dot. We really are." They walked inside, and for the first time in 3 years, they felt safe. But what they didn't know, what they wouldn't know for 15 years, was that before Marlon Brando left the courthouse that day, He'd made one more stop. He'd driven to their house. He'd used the key the auctioneer had given him, and he'd hidden something inside. Life went on for the Washington. They lived in their house, grateful but confused. They tried to reach out to Brando a few times through his lawyer, but they never heard back. Brando didn't want thanks. He'd done what needed to be done, and that was enough. Over the next 15 years, Robert and Dorothy lived quietly. Their children visited on holidays. Their grandchildren played in the backyard. The house that had almost been taken from them became the center of their family's life again. In 1988, Robert died, peaceful, at home, in his sleep. Dorothy stayed in the house for 3 more years, but by 1991, at 86, she was too frail to live alone. Her daughter Patricia moved her into a nursing home. Patricia and her daughter Nicole began the process of cleaning out the house. They planned to sell it and use the money for Dorothy's care. Nicole was 24 years old, a graphic designer living in Pasadena. She'd grown up hearing the story about Marlon Brando buying the house. It was family legend, the day a movie star saved her grandparents. But it had always felt like a fairy tale, too good to be true. On a Saturday morning in June 1991, Nicole was in the living room, pulling down old wallpaper. The house needed work. The walls were cracked, the paint was peeling. Patricia had hired a contractor, but Nicole wanted to do some of the prep work herself. She was peeling back a section of wallpaper near the fireplace when she noticed something odd. One of the wooden boards behind the wallpaper was loose. She pulled at it gently, and it came away easily. Behind the board was a small hollow space, and inside that space was an envelope. Nicole's heart started racing. She pulled out the envelope carefully. It was yellow with age, sealed with wax. On the front, in neat handwriting, it said, "For the Washington family." "Mom," Nicole called, "you need to see this." Patricia came running. "What is it?" Nicole held up the envelope. "I found this in the wall." They sat down on the floor together. Nicole broke the wax seal and opened the envelope. Inside were 2 things: a letter, handwritten on plain white paper, and 25 $100 bills. $25,000. Patricia gasped. "Oh my God!" Nicole unfolded the letter and read it out loud. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Washington, if you're reading this, it means you've lived in this house long enough to start taking it apart. That makes me happy. It means you stayed. It means this place became home in the way it was always supposed to be. This house represents everything that's wrong with America. You worked your whole lives. You paid your bills. You followed every rule. And the system tried to take it from you anyway. Not because you did anything wrong, but because to them, you were just a number, a piece of paperwork, someone who didn't matter. But you do matter. You've always mattered. And I couldn't stand by and watch you lose something you'd earned. I'm leaving you this money, $25,000, so that nobody can ever take this house from your family again. Use it for taxes. Use it for repairs. Use it to make sure your children and grandchildren have a place to come home to. This isn't charity. This is what justice looks like when the system fails. Someone with power using it to protect someone without it. I don't need thanks. I don't need recognition. I just need to know that you're home, that you're safe, that the world didn't grind you down. Take care of each other. Take care of this house. And remember, you earned this. Nobody gave it to you. You earned every inch of it. With respect, Marlon Brando. P.S. I've done this 5 times now. 5 families, 5 houses, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can. Because if people like me don't fix these injustices, who will? Nicole and Patricia sat in silence, tears streaming down their faces. Finally, Patricia whispered, "He left them $25,000 15 years ago and never told anyone. Mom, we have to tell Grandma." They drove to the nursing home immediately. Dorothy was in her room, staring out the window. When Patricia told her about the envelope, about the money, about the letter, Dorothy closed her eyes and smiled. "I knew there was something," she said softly. "All these years, I knew there was something we were missing. Robbie and I used to talk about it. Why would a man like Marlon Brando help 2 people he didn't know? We never understood. But now I do. He didn't do it for us. He did it for everyone like us." Nicole held her grandmother's hand. "Grandma, what do you want us to do with the money?" Dorothy thought for a long moment. "Sell the house. Use the money from the sale and from Marlon's envelope to start a fund. Help other families facing foreclosure. Families like us. Make sure what Marlon did doesn't end with us. Make it bigger." And that's exactly what they did. In 1992, Patricia and Nicole established the Washington Brando Housing Fund. They used the money from the house sale and the $25,000 from the envelope to create an emergency fund for families facing unfair foreclosures. Over the next decade, they helped 37 families keep their homes. Nicole became an advocate for housing rights. She gave speeches, she lobbied city officials, and she told the story of what Marlon Brando had done for her grandparents. When the story went public in 1993, reporters tried to verify it. They contacted Brando's representatives, and surprisingly, Mort Heller, Brando's longtime lawyer, confirmed it. Yes, Marlon did this, not just for the Washingtons. He did it for 5 families in the 1970s. Always anonymous, always out of his own pocket. He spent over $200,000 buying houses for people who were being screwed by the system, and he never wanted credit for it. Journalists started digging. They found records of the other 4 purchases. 1974, a Latino family in East LA facing foreclosure after a predatory loan. 1975, an elderly white couple in Burbank losing their home to eminent domain. 1977, a black single mother in Compton targeted by a corrupt bank. 1978, a Japanese-American family in Gardena, victims of racist housing policies. 5 families, 5 different circumstances, one common thread, systemic injustice, and one man who decided to do something about it. When asked why he never publicized it, Brando's response, given through Mort, was simple. Because it wasn't about me, it was about them. The moment you make it about yourself, you've missed the point. Dorothy Washington died in 1995, at 90. She lived long enough to see the Washington Brando Housing Fund help 20 families. She lived long enough to know that her story mattered. Marlon Brando died in 2004. When the news broke, Nicole, now 37 and running the housing fund full-time, released a statement. Marlon Brando gave my grandparents their home. But more than that, he gave them dignity. He saw 2 people the world had overlooked, and he made sure they mattered. That's not just generosity. That's humanity. And that's the legacy I'll spend the rest of my life trying to honor. In 2010, a documentary filmmaker named Sarah Chen made a film called 5 Houses. It told the stories of all 5 families Brando had helped. The Washington story was the centerpiece. The film featured interviews with Nicole, with Mort Heller, with the other families. One of the most powerful moments came from Maria Gonzalez, whose family had been the first to receive Brando's help in 1974. She was 63 at the time of the interview, sitting in the living room of the house Brando had bought for her parents. "We never met him," Maria said, crying. "My parents tried. They wanted to thank him, but he wouldn't see them." His lawyer told them, "Marlon doesn't want thanks. He just wants you to live your lives." And that's what we did. My brother and I grew up in this house. We went to college. We had good lives, all because a man we never met decided we deserved a chance. The documentary ended with footage of the letter Brando had left in the Washington house. The camera slowly zoomed in on one sentence. "This is what justice looks like when the system fails." Today, the Washington Brando Housing Fund has helped over 200 families. It operates in 6 states, and every family that receives help gets a copy of Brando's letter, with one sentence highlighted. "You earned this. Nobody gave it to you. You earned every inch of it." Nicole, now in her 50s, still runs the fund. When asked why she's dedicated her life to this work, she always gives the same answer. "Because Marlon Brando didn't just save my grandparents' house. He showed us what power is supposed to be used for, not for fame, not for ego, for fixing what's broken, and America is full of broken things. If I can fix even one of them, I'm honoring what he did for us." The story of Marlon Brando and the Washingtons is more than a feel-good tale. It's a blueprint. It's proof that one person with resources and courage can change lives, not through publicity stunts or tax-deductible donations, but through direct personal action. Brando could have written a check to a housing charity. He could have made a public statement about foreclosure reform. He could have used his fame to lobby politicians. Instead, he walked into a courtroom, bought 5 houses, and handed them to people who needed them. No cameras, no press releases, no credit. And 15 years later, when the truth came out, it wasn't because Brando wanted recognition. It was because a granddaughter found an envelope in a wall and realized that sometimes the greatest acts of kindness are the ones nobody knows about, until they do. The letter Brando left for the Washingtons ended with a question. If people like me don't fix these injustices, who will? Nicole Washington has an answer now. We will. All of us. Because Marlon showed us how. And that might be the most important legacy of all.